Hey class, I wanted to go over your homework from this example so that I could share with you just kind of how to work through each one of these. At the same time, I want to review the content, so I'm going to talk about some terms and just some things to make sure that you are ready for the exam. Let's take a look at the assignment, which again gives us a way to kind of take a look at some things. Let me blow this up a little bit so we can have it a little bit bigger. All right, so here's our deal. We have got equipment that we are going to buy or lease. We're not really sure. Opportunity cost of money is 12%, meaning that we can do something else with our money and we feel like that'll earn 12%. So the question is, are these investments a good return? Well, to be a good return, number one is they've got to beat the opportunity cost of investment, which is 12%. So that's kind of what that is, and that's kind of a content area to be ready for. Well, there's three choices. The first one is just to buy this $100,000 piece of equipment for $100,000. Now, we're going to do that with, as you can see, the buy decision is price and cash down. And then you can see I've already got it laid out for you that if we were to purchase this equipment, $100,000 paid up front, each year would bring us back these values. So 12,500, 12,500, 15,000, 20,000, 20,000. We're renting it and using it more, so we think we can kind of establish our business and make some money. Now in year 17 or year 7, it drops to 15,000, then 12,500, and then 12,500. Probably repair costs are going up and we're not as efficient in using that piece of equipment anymore. And then finally in year 10, we get a little bit more income, but we resell the equipment. So it brings us back 40,000. So is it okay to put $100,000 down and bring back in those incomes? Well, a couple of things kind of interesting is let's just add these up. And so that means $100,000 put down and you'll get $180,000 back. So right away, when you're just looking at this and thinking about it as an investment, man, it sure seems good to put up $100,000 and get $180 back. However, that's if you ignore time, which we are not. And so we've got these values here. How do you figure that out? Well, the two things I've shared with you are called net present value and internal rate of return. Now in Excel, you can do these pretty quickly. We've talked about it slowly. Now let's talk about it, and we've also talked about it quick. So let's just do it really fast here. So equals NPV, close parentheses, and it starts asking us some questions like, what's the rate that you require? Well, it's going to be that 12%, comma, all right, what are the values? Now remember, notice it starts at value 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So you got to start at year 1 and highlight all of those. Now, close parentheses, but we're not giving ourselves the full picture because we're not accounting for the $100,000 we had to pay out. So what I did was I just hit plus and add the 100,000. Now remember, that's at time value 0, so there is no deduction for time here. That's why it's just added back. So NPV wants the rate, it wants the cash flows from year 1 on, because you got to wait 1 year back, then 2 year back, and 3 year back all the way through. And then you have to add to it whatever you put down at time value 0. And that's going to give us a negative number. Now that negative number means we are not earning the rate that we need to get that to work out. Now, if it's 0, if it's a positive 0, like there's no extra and there's no short, then it's still a good investment because that means it's positive. But if it's negative, any value, little bit or a lot, it's not a good investment. And so in fact, internal rate of return, once again, equals IRR. Now in this one, it just says start at the value. So you start at time value 0 and you go all the way down. So it takes that first 100,000 and says, what's the rate compounded for time over this period? And the answer is 10.94%. Well, this starts to make sense. If you require your investment to earn 12 and it can only make 10.94, you are not making the mark. And that's why that's negative. So that is our first decision, and this is a no-go. Like, we are not going to do the purchase at $100,000 up front in cash. Now, let's just say that we could look at another option. We're going to buy that piece of equipment, but this time we're not going to put all the money down. This time the equipment is $100,000. We're going to put $20,000 down, so that's requiring us not to put near as much money up front. That's a much smaller negative. But to do that, we've got to borrow the money. So we're going to borrow at 7% for 10 years, and we need to calculate our loan payment. So let's do that part right quick, and we can go ahead and do that. Equals PMT, like we've been doing, and it's asking us some questions. So what's the rate? Well, the rate's going to be right there at 7%, comma, next question. How many in per year? What's the time? It's 10, comma, next question is present value. That's what you're borrowing. So I put a minus in front of that. Remember, as the PV, we always try to put that negative in front of there so that our answer comes out to be positive. But the borrowing, is going to be 100,000 minus, actually the other way around. Let's do the 20,000 minus the 100,000, which means that's going to be a negative 80,000. That's going to get me what I need. When I hit enter, that means we have an $11,390 payment to borrow that $80,000 on this equipment. Now, before I get too far, I did show you in the homework how to do a loan amortization. You want to make sure you know how to do that, because that'll be something you'll have to do. We've talked about this quite a bit, but let's just do it right quick. In fact, we can do it here. What is the balance? At time value 0, what are we borrowing? Well, I'm going to press equals here, and we're buying a $100,000 piece of equipment, but we've got to put $20,000 down. That means we're borrowing $80,000, which we kind of already knew. The payment, I'm going to go ahead and time value 1, and I'm just going to press equals and go grab that payment. I've already figured the payment. I'm kind of trying to check my work down here at the bottom. Did I do this right? All right, so every year we're going to pay that. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that all the way down to 10 years. That's supposed to be the deal. And then when it comes to these things right here, principal and interest, they make up that payment. Now you can always calculate first the interest. So that's kind of a good question for you. When you're doing a loan amortization, which one is the easiest to calculate? And you have to do it with interest. So equals. My balance, go back to when it starts, is 80,000 multiplied times the rate of 7% means that when I first started borrowing, the first year, that's a $5,600 interest cost. So principal then, the formula, is whatever your payment is minus the interest. That's the principal portion of that payment. So you can see we're almost paying half and half interest and principal. Now in the first year. Now balance. The balance formula is whatever your previous loan balance was minus the principal portion of that payment, because that's the only thing paying back the loan. So if I press enter, that means that after I make my first payment, now my loan balance is $74,000. All right, now I've written these formulas. I can just copy and paste them down, but I got to make sure my math is right. If I double click on the interest, it'll show me it's 80,000 times that rate, but I need that rate to kind of not move. So remember, dollar symbols help that to happen. So now I've got that set. I can pretty much copy this all the way down, and what I'm looking for is that last balance. Once I make that payment in the last year, the principal portion by the formulas should exactly be what my previous balance was, and that's what pays the loan off. So that gives me a little confidence. That payment, that is the right payment for that setup. So really, I was just trying to check my work. So down in here in our loan payment equals, that's the payment that we make, equals whatever that number is. And so we've checked it. That's 10 years worth of payments. Now net cash flow. We can kind of adjust that now. So we do have to pay $20,000 out in the first year, or in the upfront. But then each year we get our income just like before, but we have to subtract out the loan payment, the whole thing, principal and interest. And so that means we have a little bit of money left. Now, if I keep going through, next year we have about the same. Next year we have about the same. Actually, we go up a little bit now next year because we got a little more money earned. Then finally here, we actually kind of jump up to a much more positive number, and I bring that all the way down. And so we get a chance to get a bigger flow of money here. But again, we've got to make that loan payment, so it's not as good as it used to be. But we do have something here that's very important. From a time value money standpoint, we're only putting out $20,000. We're deferring these loan payments out over time at a rate of 7%. So now, does this help net present value? Well, before we calculate it, let's just apply some logic here. I have a business that a piece of equipment can earn me without any borrowing 10.94%. If I can earn 10.94% on a piece of equipment that I could also borrow some money on to defer its cost at 7%, that starts to let me know that this might be a better deal here. This equipment is earning me money, but the cost of that borrowed money on that equipment is only 7%. So that kind of looks like it's shaping up to be a good deal. Let's calculate NPV and see. Once again, equals NPV, same thing. Parentheses, what's the rate? Still the same 12% discount. Comma, what are the values 1 through the end? It's adjusted. It's not what we used to be. We had to make a loan payment, so now it's these values over here, and then close parentheses. But plus, we do have to add up the $20,000 that we had to pay down up front. Press enter. This time we don't have a negative number, we have a positive number, so this option does look like a better deal. Now to check our work here, equals IRR. All the way at the very beginning, that 20,000 negative, and then it brings back in those flows of money, and actually that earning me 20% now. So I took the same piece of equipment, understanding borrowing and time value of money, and raised it from that same piece of equipment being a bad decision to that same piece of equipment earning me now 20%, because I'm using borrowed money to earn money while I continue on. So that's kind of the whole point of that scenario. So actually, this is a good deal. All right, so this is a good deal, and that's what I know right now. Now, I did give you a third option, which is relatively new, and it's this idea of a lease. So with this lease, it's kind of a different deal. We actually don't pay anything up front. We're just trying to make money on this equipment. We don't pay anything at all. Now, that means that in your years, you get the same kind of money, except for down here at the end, instead of getting $40,000 because we sold it, we actually only get a $10,000 back, because every year it's worth a little bit less to us because it's got more downtime, it's got problems. And on the lease, maybe there are some ways that it would improve our annual dollars in, like maybe there's a little less cost that we have. However, let's just keep the revenues the same. What would it look like if you did not have to pay for this thing? You just got to lease it. So the lease is already figured for us. It's $12,000. So I'm just going to say, well, that's a $12,000 lease cost equals there. Now you start to kind of figure out some things here, like, hold on a minute. We have to pay $12,000 for the lease. The loan was only $11,390. I would rather have this piece of equipment, right? Here's something though. We don't actually have to pay anything down. You still have to pay $20,000 out there. This time we have to pay nothing up front. There's no cost at all. So it is kind of, at first you have to look at it and think, wow, man, that's almost the same as owning it. And you're right, it is really close. It's just a little bit higher, but we don't have to pay that money out. So let's figure out and see what this would be worth. So let's run this. Same concepts. I've got the lease in here. I need to do an adjusted cash flow. So in year one, you make $12,500, but the lease costs you $12,000, so you only netted $500. Once again, I didn't have to pay anything out front though. But let's just run that all the way down. And of course, we have some different numbers here. Now in the very end, you can kind of see something that's a little interesting. We only are bringing in $10,000, but that lease is $12,000. You probably have no business doing year 10, but let's just say that it's the same relationship as all the others, so we're going to keep it the same. All right, so that is the lease. What's the NPV? Equals NPV. Come across here. What's the rate? Still 12%, comma. What are the values? Year one to the end, close parentheses. There is nothing else to add to that. No money down, so you really don't even have to do that part. Hit enter here. It is a NPV of $17,752 based on these numbers. Now you can see a couple of things here. Number one, we're only getting 500 and 500. Comparing it across here, we're looking at, we get 3,000, then we get 8,000, 8,000, 8,000. Then we get 3,000, 500, 500. And then in the year we have this. And so those are the present values. So actually, it's worth more to us. $17,752. It's worth more to us, and the big difference is what you're having to pay out today. In fact, that's a lot of the way the investments are looked at. If you're going to pay a lot out today, it's going to be a pretty critical review. If you're going to pay a little bit less out today, still a critical review. But if you're paying nothing out, these are all positive cash flows. They don't have anything to have to offset. You get $17,752. Now, just if you're looking at this like the lease, the $20,000 we had to pay down here, that didn't exist from the borrowing. So that's why this is actually the best deal. And so that's what this would be. This is the best approach. So even though we don't own it, we don't care about the ownership of it, there's no pride in it, we're looking for the best NPV. So in this case, the highest value is going to be the lease approach. And that's kind of what time value of money tells us. And that's the intent of the homework. Is so trying to understand, number one, how to use opportunity cost, which is what we have here, applied to all the situations exactly the same. How can we take a buy decision, and how does borrowing factor into that? The biggest thing to focus on is your loan rate. If it's less than your opportunity cost of money, and if that investment is earning that number, a high enough number to pay for that loan rate, it might be better to do borrowing. And that's kind of what you end up with here, and that is the summary of the homework. But these all involve money up front. So if you're able to lease, it's quite possible, if the returns are very similar, then you might end up with a better net present value, which in this case, that is our answer. Hopefully this helps you with the homework in the week. And so take a look at this, compare it to the work you did, kind of step through slow, and hopefully this helps review the content. Thanks.